Welcome to the 25th episode of the Postmugglism podcast. I'm your host, Nate. Today is a brand new day, and Papa's got a brand new bag. I'm trying some new things out in this episode of the podcast in hopes of further streamlining my content pipeline and being able to produce more and more often, but more about that in just a minute. First, thanks for tuning into this episode, Emotions in the Body. And note, that's not emotions and the body, it's emotions in the body, because this episode is about how our bodies store emotional energy, such as trauma, at the physical, mental, and spiritual level, and what happens when we don't address this for a long time, and just what exactly we can do about it in the present moment, and also years later if we've ignored it for a time. I'm going to share some of my own experiences and discoveries as a shamanic healer, helping people work out old emotional traumas to get relief from physical problems decades after their initial traumas took place. And I'm going to walk you through a very effective diagnostic process that you can use to find and identify energetic issues in your own life. If you haven't yet, please take a moment to subscribe to this show wherever you listen to podcasts. Or you can also find me on YouTube, so that you get notified every time a new episode of this show is released. And find more of my content, like articles, my monthly lunar mansion guides, and other videos and more on my website at www.postmugglism.com. I'm pretty excited about this episode for a variety of reasons. If you're a returning visitor to the show, though, I feel like I should give you some advance notice that this episode is going to be very different from all my previous ones because I'm trying a new approach. I'm putting out a lot of stuff these days on a lot of platforms, and I tend to have a perfectionist attitude towards anything that I produce. So I spend more time scripting and editing now than I actually do sharing my ideas, and I'm trying to change that. This podcast has been the greatest time sink of all the stuff that I'm making, so I've been rethinking the format a little bit to expedite my episode creation. The short version of the story is that I'm moving from a scripted performance format to a just you and me talking kind of format that will be less formal, more conversational, and more forgiving of minor errors. I've also incorporated some fancy new AI tools into my workflow, so you may notice some improvements. If you like this new format, or you hate it, please let me know. I'm definitely still tweaking and refining the concept. And as we go through this episode, if you have questions about your own healing journey or your own experiences with energy in the body, please feel free to reach out to me by email or direct message, and I'll do my best to help. You can find me on X/Twitter as Postmugglism, and by email at postmugglism@gmail.com. If you're currently enduring symptoms or stuck patterns and repeating situations in your life and would like some relief, I offer all first-time clients a 50% off discount using the coupon code FIRSTSESSION, all spelled out. You can redeem this coupon and book a session at www.sacredserpent.co, as well as you can see a bunch of testimonials from my other clients and things like that. All right, moving into the content of this episode now, let's get started with an explanation of what I mean when I say emotional energy, and then discuss how this gets stored in the body and how this can cause health issues over time and what we can do about it. Enjoy. Mainstream medicine more or less refuses to acknowledge the existence of emotional energy as something that can be stored in the body and have some kind of an effect on your physical being. Unless, of course, you come to them with something they can't understand, and then they have to blame it on stress. I remember this used to happen to me all the time. I would go to the doctor with like heart palpitations or some other kind of weird thing that was bothering me, and it'd been going on for some time and I couldn't solve it myself, and that would be their answer because I couldn't think of anything else to do besides just say, this is stress. And it's not like they were wrong. It's exactly what it was. But they didn't really have anything that they could do to help me relieve that stress besides give me the advice of like getting a better job or something like that, which wasn't very helpful. And that's kind of the problem. We don't really have any tools in the allopathic medicinal framework for dealing with energy in the body. And for the most part, we pretend like it's not a real thing. But my experiences as a shamanic energy healer have removed any doubt in my mind that energy in the body is a real thing. In fact, I've come to understand that essentially every health problem has a physical, mental, and emotional and spiritual component, that every problem exists at each of those layers simultaneously. And crazy as it sounds, chronic pain and illness can typically be traced back to some kind of an unresolved emotional trauma, some intense emotional experience that we weren't able to really wrap our brains around or fully integrate at the time and have buried somewhere in our psyche, our subconscious. And that's caused some kind of a break that makes us work around that emotional issue. And in so doing, we create imbalance in our mind and our energetic body, and then eventually also in our physical body. How does that work exactly? Well, according to my teacher, Alberto Villoldo of the Four Winds Institute, Where traditional medicine focuses on the physical body and the layers within, like bone, muscle, tissue, and so forth, the parts of it that we can see and touch, there is more to our being than what meets the eye. In addition to those physical layers, we also have an energetic body, which is often referred to as the light body. And this energetic body sits between our spirit and our physical being. So, like the divine spark, if you will, flows through our spirit and into our energetic body. And as my teacher says, the energetic body is constantly projecting or manifesting our physical form into being. And so when we collect some kind of emotional debris, some energy that really isn't our own anymore, or it should have passed on after we had experienced it, when that collects in the body, it acts as kind of a filter. And you can imagine sort of like a can light where you put like a blue filter or a green filter in front of the light and it changes the color of the light. Such it is with us when we collect some kind of emotional debris. That heavier, denser energy is then projected into our physical being, and that eventually leads to all kinds of physical illnesses and disease. To address this problem and to achieve permanent healing, it's essential to address both the physical problem and the underlying emotional and mental issues. Only by releasing the energy of that experience, of that emotional trauma, can we free our minds to integrate its lessons and allow our body to restore balance. Everybody has experienced feeling emotional energy in the body, but probably hasn't recognized that as it's happening. So here are some of the most common examples that everybody has encountered at one time or another. For example, anxiety and stress manifest as digestive issues, IBS, and so on in the intestines. And grief or a broken heart can have a direct impact on the respiratory and cardiovascular systems. And I think we've probably all experienced untreated emotional fatigue that leads to physical exhaustion, like when you've been fighting with your significant other for hours and hours and it just drains you completely. And if that goes on for several days, it can impact your general well-being. Emotional burdens can often feel like physical burdens, resulting in back, shoulder, and arm pain. My wife, Sarah, for example, had an experience where she wasn't able to lift her arms over about her shoulder height without it being really, really painful. And this was happening at the same time that her aging parents were needing some help, and we're at a distance here. And so she was feeling some guilt for that and some burden for not being able to be there in person. And this was also triggering some like prior childhood issues as well. And possibly the most common of all is a headache that comes from some kind of challenging or difficult to accept information. These are all just examples of how emotional energy shows up in the body. And these are kind of the direct cause and effect examples, where there are many other examples where there's a much less direct and obvious kind of a connection, but can still result in serious physical issues and long-term mental health concerns. Where does this energy that's hurting us come from? Well, it can come from our own emotional state. If we're really angry and we can't let it go, or we're very sad and we can't get ourselves out of it, those kind of things, those will affect our health. But it can also be energy that we're exposed to, other people's energy, or energy from our environment. Settings like your workplace or social surroundings can directly affect your personal energy and well-being. Simply by passing through some space and lingering in it, you pick up the energy that is in the air. Spending a lot of time with somebody who's a very negative person can bring you down. And likewise, spending time with somebody who's a very positive person can lift you up. But what's necessary in order to take care of ourselves is to prioritize regular energetic self-care practices. And these are essential because you want to cleanse the energy of other people off of you and out of your field as you go about your life, or you'll carry that like energetic residue and that emotion into your other experiences. This is why when you get angry at one person, it's very difficult not to be angry with the next person, right? You're still sitting in that energy, and so it sort of transfers. And in addition to our own energetic hygiene regimen, it's a really good idea to periodically have your energy reset with a professional cleansing. Here in Mexico, we call them limpias, and you can have your energy field cleansed with smudging and flower essences and prayers and things like that. How big of a problem is this, though? Well, this stuff can kill you. Stress and unresolved emotional issues are very much linked to various physical ailments and are considered leading causes of illness and even mortality, indirectly at least. It creates a lot of situations in which your life will be threatened in the long term. Heart disease is exacerbated by stress. diabetes is more likely under stressful conditions, and so on. So it creates conditions that deteriorate the body, and then over time that leads to, a shorter lifespan. And this leads to a very destructive cycle where the toxic energy that's stored in the body creates some kind of pain and discomfort, and then over time that becomes chronic and leads to illness. And once you're trapped in chronic pain, that leads to a poor mental health state because it's depressing and demoralizing to constantly not feel good and not be able to do the things that you want to do. And when you're in that kind of a situation, you tend to deprioritize self-care, which leads to an overall drop in your well-being. And of course, that feeds back into the cycle, more pain, more illness, and a lower mental health state, and so on. And there are things that we can do about this. We can learn to manage our energy, but in the West, we certainly weren't raised that way. We've had to learn it as adults. And as adults, we have already had years worth of emotional trauma that we need to work through. So we need to learn energetic hygiene techniques such as cleansing and meditation to manage our emotional energy and improve our overall health. But there are most likely, almost certainly, things that are buried deep in our psyche and our subconscious that need to be rooted out with a professional assistance by going to an energetic healer and working with them to find the parts that you can't necessarily see yourself. I mean, even myself as a shamanic energy healer, when there's something really deep or really stuck, I have to go to my buddy Jerome, who went through the same training that I did. And, we trade sessions because there are all kinds of things that you can't see. Once it's buried in your subconscious, it becomes part of your shadow, if you will. You won't be able to see it in yourself, and you'll need a partner to work with. And somebody who's talented in, gently bringing those things out of you in ways that you can see and recognize and work with. In order to maintain your energetic hygiene, there are a variety of practices which are very useful, such as salt baths or swimming in the ocean, which is my personal favorite, smudging with incense and so forth, and scraping your energy field with selenite to cleanse and restore your sense of balance. Similarly, you can tap into meditation as a way to recenter yourself. And in that meditative state, you can work through the things that are bothering you, sort of bring them up in your mind, feel where they are in the body, listen to what the body has to say about that. And then with some of the techniques I'm going to talk about here in a moment, trace that to its origin and go through a releasing process, something such as a fire ceremony, where you take the pieces of yourself, the pieces of your psyche that you intend to release, those old beliefs or bad habits and things like that. And you say you blow it into a stick, take your sensation of it, your awareness of it, and your desire to change it like that. And then you light that on fire and let that burn away. Or you can do something, a much bigger fire ceremony, a bonfire ceremony if you have the space, obviously. But these are things that you can do with tools as simple as a candle and a toothpick. Also, just connecting with the earth through grounding exercises and time spent outside in nature, particularly barefoot and with a certain amount of skin exposed to the sun and to the elements and so forth. These exercises can ground you and help you release unconsciously the stuff that's just kind of currently hanging in your field. It's not going to necessarily get rid of that deeper trauma stuff, but for the stuff that you're dealing with right now, it's a great way to release that so that it doesn't become trauma that you have to deal with more serious work later on. And finally, just contributing to other people's healing through like intention groups, learning Reiki and sending healing energy to people and things like that. That's a wonderful way to bring positive energy into your field and to boost your personal well-being. And while you might not be able to clear all of your deeper emotional issues without some kind of professional assistance, it can be very useful to have some better idea what it is that you want to work on when you go see someone like that. And so I'm going to teach you a little self-diagnosis method that's quite easy and simple, has worked for everybody that I've shown it to. To start, stop thinking. The mind confuses things, confuses the issue by filling our head with what-if scenarios and potential reasons why. And the body is just a much simpler kind of communicator. So listen to the body instead. What does it feel like when you sit quietly with your feelings? Just whatever is present for you right now. Can you identify any physical sensations that stem from those feelings? Are you nervous? Are you feeling that in the gut? Are you overwhelmed? Are you feeling that in the head or the heart? Are your palms sweating? So on. If so, describe what this sensation is like to you in physical terms. You feel full or empty, pulled? You feel weighed down? Is it heavy? Is it light? So on. And then try to identify where in the body it is. Are you feeling this in the head? Are you feeling it in the heart or in the stomach? Now, if you've identified all of those things, been able to put that together so far, then let's just try to put a name to it. Give that a description, something physical, like I'm feeling a weight on my shoulders. I'm feeling an emptiness in my chest. I'm feeling a twisting, nervous feeling in my guts. And once you've been able to name it, you can trace it back in time, asking yourself, when's the first time that I remember ever feeling this sensation? And believe it or not, there'll be some kind of a weird connection between that first memory a long time ago and whatever you're feeling now, because there's some kind of a pattern that's repeating itself throughout time. And in many cases, this is some sort of karmic lesson that's presenting you all of these new opportunities to learn this same lesson until you get it right, so to speak. So diagnosing these issues is half of solving the problem in the first place. So let's say we've gone through this exercise and we know that we're feeling a heaviness in our chest or a twisting feeling in the guts or something like that. What do we do with that information? Well, we need a map in order to understand this territory of our body. And chakras are really the best and simplest map for understanding the energetic body. So starting at the bottom and working our way up, I'm going to go through each of the chakras and kind of explain what they relate to. The first is the root chakra, and this is at the base of the spine, and it influences security and your feeling of connection to the physical world, to Mother Nature, to life, and so on. The belly chakra sits in the lower abdomen. It relates to our base drives and our connections to family, ancestry, and sexuality. The third chakra, the solar plexus chakra, sits in the upper abdomen and controls self-esteem, confidence, motivation, drive, our sense of personal power, and so on. And then next, the heart chakra, which sits in the center of our chest, is associated with giving and receiving love, compassion, and a general sense of emotional well-being. Next, the throat chakra governs communication and self-expression. And then the third eye, slightly above and between the eyebrows, is associated with thinking and knowing, sort of a mental intuition. So not intuiting by your feelings, but by sudden, unexplained knowings. That's the third eye intuition. And then finally, the crown at the top of our head. This is the seat of our spiritual connection to our higher consciousness and also to the divine. And each of the chakras relate to not only a part of the body, but also kind of a part of the psyche. And so issues, physical issues that are taking place in one part of the body or the other can be located to the nearest chakra, essentially. And that will give you clues to understanding what kind of an emotional issue might be underlying that or at the root of that. So starting again at the first chakra and working our way up, root chakra physical issues could be in the legs, feet, the spine, tailbone, buttocks, and so on. And it might relate to feeling disconnected or directionless, feeling immobilized, being consumed with paranoia, feeling of persecution, phobias, or just an inability to trust that the universe is going to care for you and take care of you. Issues in the belly chakra physically would be reproductive issues or issues with the bladder and abdomen, back pain sometimes. And these might relate to issues with the family, with your sexuality, with your feelings of self-worth, or even potentially karmic issues. And then next, in the solar plexus, the physical issues would be digestive problems, problems with muscle tissue and metabolism, and the emotional counterparts would be power struggles, low self-esteem, lack of confidence, and inability to make decisions. Next, in the heart chakra, the physical issues are problems with the heart, circulatory system, heart palpitations, and respiratory problems. And these might relate to issues with giving and receiving love, feelings of isolation, overwhelming grief, or apathy. Next, in the throat chakra, the issues might relate to the throat or neck or the jaw. So things like a sore throat or a thyroid problem could be throat chakra issues. And then these might relate to emotional problems with communication, difficulty expressing oneself, or feeling like one is being heard. And then in the third eye, the issues are headaches, obviously, and then issues with the eyes, ears, balance, and dizziness, and so on. And these relate to more mental concerns like lack of clarity, intuition, and insight, and feelings of confusion or an inability to accept reality. And finally, at the crown, injuries and disease of the brain and the nervous system are the physical ailments that relate to the crown chakra. And these would relate to spiritual issues like spiritual disconnection, lack of purpose, and feelings of separation from the divine. When we understand this map and the territory and how to navigate it, we get all kinds of benefits from the ability to release emotional energy, to let things go. And I don't just mean let them go in our mind, but actually let them go with our body. And the benefits of this include things like just a greater peace of mind and sense of tranquility and being okay in oneself and one's body, and increased emotional control as well, and the reduction of sort of triggering events and people that trigger us or that we project our issues onto. It aids us in our personal evolution because by releasing the emotional energy, we can finally integrate those experiences mentally, psychologically, and then we experience personal growth. And this leads to enhanced tolerance of others and a deeper understanding of ourselves. And finally, it improves the relationships that we have with the people around us and the world around us in general, because by releasing the issues that are holding us back, we stop projecting our problems onto others, and that leads to healthier and more harmonious relationships individually, intimately, of course, just in the greater world at large as well. In addition to these traditional emotional types of problems, there are problems that we can encounter which don't necessarily have to do with some experience that we've had personally in this lifetime anyway. They can stretch back to prior lifetimes or to our lineage as well. So we bear the crosses of our prior generations, certainly, in karmic terms. And there's really nothing fair or unfair about that. That's just the way that things work. You are a composition of a lot of different forces, including the energies of your ancestors. And as that adds up into you, you get the good and the bad with that. And this karmic responsibility of processing and integrating these experiences, some of them not even being your own necessarily, is just part of the show. So if you want to be healthy and not have problems, just accept that from time to time you're going to have some ancestral trauma that you have to contribute to working out. And likewise, you'll have some past life traumas that you'll have to contribute to balancing your energy across those lifetimes as well. But it can be a little trickier to identify because it's not an experience that happened to you. So when you do this self-diagnostic that I taught you just a minute ago, it doesn't work quite the same way because you can't trace it back in time into some original wound that's in your own life. Any problem that has always been with you since as far back as you can remember is very likely to be either an ancestral trauma or a past life trauma that's manifesting into this life. And you'll deal with them in much the same type of way with maybe a few little quirks or differences about the approach, but the effect is basically the same. We release the energy and then we integrate the experience. And in this case, not even necessarily mentally as much as spiritually and across the lineage, across our past lives. So as we're looking at, let's say, ancestral trauma first, the types of issues that are very common to encounter in your lineage somewhere would be things like matrilineal issues. These are more common in my experience than patrilineal issues. Not to say that those don't exist, but it's that mothers pass on their belief structures to particularly their daughters. And as this happens over many generations, there can be this kind of inertia that young women are always pulling against that comes from the beliefs and the lifestyles and the restrictions that their mothers and their mothers' mothers had to live through. And in many cases, they can be held back in some kind of way from expressing themselves as they would in a modern situation, as they believe they have the right to do because of this sort of weight of this ancestral trauma of their matrilineal line and the women in their matrilineal line not being able to express themselves that way. And it's interesting because it's both a call, a cry for help from that line to be healed, but sometimes it feels sort of judgmental as if your ancestors are looking down on you. And these aren't my words. This is the words of multiple clients that I've had that have been in this situation. So that's fairly common. And another one, and this is more common in the patrilineal line, though not exclusively, would be something like alcoholism and other forms of addiction. Families with histories of addictive personalities can leave lasting impacts on future generations, and that requires healing primarily through self-understanding by discovering and then breaking that cycle. And the same can be said for abuse of all different types, whether that's physical abuse, emotional abuse, or sexual abuse. Oftentimes that repeats itself down a family line, unfortunately, passing from mother or father to child. And then as that child grows up, they have kids, they repeat the same problems, the same mistakes, until somewhere in that line, someone sort of wakes up to the pattern that's happening within them and decides to bear the responsibility and heal the wound. And another really interesting one that I've encountered a number of times is with the children of immigrant families. They often carry self-abusive work and or study ethics due to ancestral trauma from grandfather coming into, say, America from a different country and then having to work harder than everyone else and seeing it as necessary in order to make it in this world. In the modern age, most of that doesn't translate very well, but second and third generation kids can be very weighed on by their parents and by kind of just the expectation of their ancestry in general to succeed above and beyond, to always work hard, to always study hard, even to the point of sort of like self-abuse. This is very common. So these are forms of ancestral trauma that are very common, and it's certainly not comprehensive, but these are some that I've seen come up repeatedly with my clients. To do something about this, to heal ancestral traumas, you're going to need the help of a professional energy healer, and not necessarily just like a Reiki healer, though there's absolutely nothing wrong with Reiki. Reiki is primarily good for boosting health by sending positive energy to someone. It doesn't necessarily like dig in and do the surgical work of removing these old wounds or identifying the issues that underlie them. So when you're looking for an energetic healing provider, make sure it's someone that has this therapeutic aspect to what they do as well. Some of my favorite strategies that I use all the time are things like cord cuttings, where it's not necessarily cut something loose, but you kind of like clear the expectations from the lineage. That happens a lot with the matrilineal line or with repeated abuse. We cut the cord, we thank the line for all of their gifts, and we send them to their highest good, which means that we let go of all of the heavier stuff and we keep only the stuff that's light and diffuse. Another tactic that's very different, but also very effective, is what my teacher called an ancestral constellation, which is kind of a weird way to title it. But the idea is that you surround yourself with the spirits of various recently dead ancestors that can sort of function as intermediaries for you. And with your partner, you're asked to take on the persona of, let's say, your dead grandmother, dead grandfather or something, and then answer your questions or answer the questions of the healer who is acting on your behalf. So you come up with a list of questions, what you want to know. You take on the role of your ancestor. The healer asks you the question, and then you answer as if you were your dead grandmother, dead grandfather. And you do so without thinking too much about it. You sort of speak off the top of your mind. And you go around and you have these conversations with various dead ancestors to get different intuitive insights into what might be underlying your problem. And then from that, you can go through an integrative process. You can sit and contemplate in your normal state of mind what that might mean to you. You can investigate some of the things that come up, if there were facts that you can look into and so forth. And from that, it's interesting how much useful information can arise. Another different tactic would be a guided meditation. Once you've been working with someone, you have to work with them for a little while so that they know kind of what your issues are like, and then they can walk you through various guided meditation sessions and have you encounter various prompts or archetypes that provide insight into your problem as well. And this is just kind of digging around in your psyche and with a guide. And finally, ancestral veneration really is one of the most effective and simplest and easiest to just keep as an ongoing practice kind of techniques that comes out of an ancestral healing endeavor. Simply honoring your ancestors with simple rituals and ceremonies that acknowledge their presence, and once you've established a relationship with them, to seek their guidance and their blessing. This is something we should probably all do, but if you're having issues with your lineage, it's a very good time to pay it forward. Light them a candle, leave them some treats that they liked in life, or coffee if they were a coffee drinker, little shot glass of booze if that was their thing, and so on, to reconnect with them on an energetic level. And all of these things, you should probably do all of these things together, doing some veneration, doing your own meditation and guided meditation, being walked through an ancestral constellation, and cutting some cords as you identify those problems. But using all of these techniques together, you can do a great deal towards healing these ancestral wounds. When it comes to past life issues or karmic patterns, if you will, these can be equally as difficult to identify, maybe even a little bit more difficult, because in the case of ancestral traumas, you can kind of look back in your family's history and say, are these patterns that repeat? You know, I act this way. Does my mother or my father act this way? Does their mother or their father act this way? Is this family style problem? And find it that way. But when it comes to past life issues, it's oftentimes just the category of things that we don't really know where they come from. And, you know, it requires somebody who can get a visionary state going and channel some image from your past life to get a clue as to what that might have looked like in context. And of course, that can be somewhat difficult to trust because who knows? How do you verify any of that information? But what we do know is that these patterns appear and that they're not linked to specific things that happen to us in our lives. And therefore, we can't point a finger at a bad habit that we have and go, I know why I do that. And if we can't, and it doesn't exist anywhere in our ancestry, then it's most likely a past life issue, some kind of karma that we're discovering and then processing. And typical kinds of karmic problems that you might incur would be things like unexplained fears and triggers, phobias that you have, but don't seem particularly rational. You don't have any reason to be incredibly afraid of fire or heights or spiders or something, but it's there and you can't shake it. Likewise, patterns that just express themselves over and over and over again that are unhealthy, obviously, to you and others, but there's nothing that you feel like you can do about them because every time, no matter what you try to do, you just end up in these same situations again. This often happens related to your passions, what you think are your passions or your purpose, the love that you're trying to seek, and so on. And if you're looking for the wrong type of expression or the wrong type of person, without realizing it, these will just happen again and again and again until we finally understand this is a karmic lesson. I had both. I was attracted to women that were very, very bad for me, and I was attracted to jobs and roles that were very bad for me. And I would continue to go back to the same type of pattern, even though I thought I was maybe trying something new or different. It would just end up being the same, and I couldn't see it at first. And so that's a pretty good example of what it might look like when you're unraveling some kind of a karmic pattern. And sometimes, it's not really about you. Sometimes you're healing some kind of societal trauma. You're working out some karmic pattern that affects everybody in your generation or everybody in your nation, history of your nation. And when that happens, we don't really have any direct thing that we can do besides go through that and recognize it for what it is. It's grieving and healing some kind of a collective karmic wound. There's a lot of that happening in the world right now, and we can see it. Doesn't seem like anybody can do anything to get in front of some of the tragedies that are happening right now. And it goes back multiple generations. It goes back sometimes, in some cases, hundreds or thousands of years. And no one person can untangle it, but everybody is involved in a sort of a field effect of it. And these things will affect all of us as well. And all that we can do is recognize them, release the energy, and move on. And that in some way contributes to the processing and the healing of that at a field level. Now, one of the most common questions that I get asked is, well, what about doctors and medicine? If you're a shamanic energy healer, do you go to the doctor? Of course I go to the doctor, because shamanic energy healing doesn't, heal broken bones or cut fingers or necessarily eradicate infections. Though in many cases, energy healing has the benefit of boosting the body's ability to heal itself, whereas traditional medicine has a very combative kind of framework. It tries to remove disease. It hides symptoms or makes them go away. And in so doing, it impedes natural healing processes so that artificial ones can take over. Energy medicine is very different from that in that it operates in a collectivist, animist framework where we're all connected, and it tries to enhance those natural healing processes by addressing imbalances across mind, body, and spirit. But that doesn't mean that they're entirely opposed to one another or that they can't get along in some sense. In fact, if you want to experience rapid healing, then it's best to employ both techniques. We can aid the body in its ability to heal itself by removing negative energy. Then it will heal faster, and it will help us maintain a positive mental state as well, which boosts our immune system and our various other healing functions. Injuries are best addressed first with medicine, and then having the healing process boosted with energy work. But chronic issues, on the other hand, are best addressed first at the energetic level, and then aided with physical healing techniques via medicine and treatment. And that's because, as we were talking about before, there's some kind of an imprint in the energetic body that's filtering the energy that's flowing through us and causing these problems to regenerate. So if we just continue to address them at a physical level, we never actually get full healing. So it's often very necessary to combine both of these techniques, as well as homeopathy and various other healing techniques as well. Now that we know that emotional energy is a real thing and it's worth our attention, that there is value in clearing and cleansing ourselves on a regular basis, let's look into the future. What would the world be like if we all practiced these habits, if we all knew how to clear our energy and to release the things that no longer serve us? We would prioritize our emotional homeostasis, because when you're in good energetic health, it encourages you to be a better person. It encourages greater empathy, compassion, and interconnectedness. It fosters healthier relationships and contributes to a more profound understanding of the world. I think we would make a habit of clearing our emotional energy regularly, because when we stay on top of energetic cleansings with practices like Reiki, crystal healing, smudging, and so on, we rebalance our vital energy regularly, and that keeps us in a state of well-being and mental clarity. And we would recognize the importance of not sitting in toxic emotions. Because when we do that, we're literally forcing ourselves to relive these traumatic experiences. In any case where you've been sitting in some emotion for more than 15 minutes, it's doing you some kind of harm. So it's time to clear that out and move on. And perhaps most important of all, you can just imagine how different the world would be if we were teaching our children these energetic cleansing habits, if they didn't have to develop decades of trauma before they encountered these practices for the first time, if they started fresh and stayed cleansed. How much less trauma do you think there would be in the world? It's kind of an exciting idea. For those of you who have the opportunity to be parents and to teach your kids, I highly recommend teaching them energetic hygiene, smudging, clearing their chakras, and so on, so that whenever they encounter some problem in life, they know how to handle it immediately, and it doesn't end up being a phobia, a fear, a resentment, something that twists them up for decades before they realize that they can just simply let it go. Thanks for listening to this 25th episode of the Postmugglism podcast. I hope this has been informative and interesting, and that you now have some additional tools and tricks up your sleeve in order to help yourself be healthier, to maintain your energy, to keep yourself in a good way, and to prepare yourself for the interesting times that we have ahead of us. And I don't think that most of us have any doubt in our minds that it's not a very good idea to trust mainstream medicine and pharmaceutical companies and for-profit hospitals and all of that mess with our health. Maybe we have to trust them when we have some kind of an emergency situation, but we probably shouldn't trust them to tell us what to eat and how to think about our health, because they have a terrible track record of it. And that's simply because they're working with limited information. What's going on in the physical body is only a half or maybe even just a third of what's really going on with us when we're in some kind of state of illness. There are imbalances physically, obviously, but there are also emotional and spiritual imbalances that have to be addressed. And when we ignore these, we just continue to have the same problems show up again and again and again. And that happens to too many people, that they spend the money and the time and the energy with the mainstream medicine. They fail to get the kind of lasting healing experience that they're looking for. And I know that because I've experienced that myself. And I didn't actually get anywhere in my healing journey until I incorporated both medical treatment, herbal remedies, and so forth, and energy healing all together, with an understanding that I also had to change my state of mind and the choices that I was making to support all of that, because healing is a holistic endeavor. I thank you very much for spending your time with me today and listening to this episode and my takes and what I've learned from my experience as a shamanic healer and on my own healing journey. And I hope that that's done something good for you and informed you in a way that enables you to heal more quickly and to experience greater overall health and well-being in your life. If you're going through your own healing journey right now, or you have some questions about energy healing in general, please know that you can always reach out to me via Twitter at Postmugglism or via my email at postmugglism@gmail.com, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you have. And if you're looking to do some work on yourself to actually begin a healing journey or continue one, my calendar is open and you can book with me anytime at www.sacredserpent.co. Thanks for spending your time with me again, and I'll see you in the next one.